Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on diversity inclusion in the food and farming sector, hosted by Sustain. My name is Maddie Guerlain. I'm based at Sustain and coming to you live from Hackney in London this morning, despite what my accent might imply otherwise. I hope everyone can hear me, and those of you who've done webinars with me before will know that I like to just make sure the sound's working and practice our chat function, which is over on the left-hand side of your screen. There's an attendee chat. So if you just want to type in there where you're listening from, and since it's the start of September, if you could also include a food that you are looking forward to eating in the autumn/harvest season that we're entering into. Personally, I'm quite excited for pumpkin pie and Brussels sprouts. So if you just, and as I said, I'm in Hackney. So if other people just want to chime in there, it means we know that my sound is working and we know that you know where the chat is. So I already know Ben's listening in. We don't know what his favorite or what he's looking forward to, but we've got Maddie from Bristol, looking forward to local apples. Christopher from Newbury, looking forward to Seps from local woodland, very cool. Foraged apples and pears from Alisa. Damsons in Edinburgh from Rosemary. Welcome, welcome, everybody. This is great. Got fennel, apple cake. Got a lot of people going for sprouts and apple pie. It's a great season, isn't it? Anyways, so this is also a nice way for you to just know this is where we have our chat. I'm just going to take us through a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll get into the discussion. So you can see on that left-hand side of your screen, we've got the attendee list, which shows everyone who's listening in with us today by phone. We'll just see a phone number, but otherwise we'll see their name likely. And there's that chat bar. We always really encourage people to use the chat box. You can use that to ask questions or to share information with other attendees. It's public, so everyone can see it, but it's not part of the recording. And if there are any questions in there, when we get to the Q&A from the audience, I'll always try to repeat those out loud. So in the recording, we have a sense of what people have said there. And again, if it makes sense, we always welcome you to share contact information, projects, links, etc. It's a great opportunity often to connect with other people who might be working on similar projects or topics in your area or elsewhere. Okay, I'm getting told that my video is pixelating, but the audio is okay. So I'm going to let it roll a little bit longer, and if it gets bad, I'll turn my video off. So thanks for letting me know. Just to say also, at the top of your screen, there's an Ask a Question green button. So you're welcome to use this if you have a question that's private and only for the presenters to see. But if it's something that you're okay with everyone seeing what your question is, like a general question, we'd encourage you to use the chat. Either way, I've got two colleagues who are keeping an eye on the chat and an eye on those private questions to make sure that they get into the Q&A session. So depending on how many we have, we'll try to get through them all. But we'll see where we go. But either way, we'll see them no matter how you ask it. And as I mentioned, the webinar will be recorded. We'll post a link to it on our website later this week. And I'll also email everyone who's registered for it in order for you to know when that's gone live. So that's enough of the tech stuff. I will pause there. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Sustain and where we're coming from today, and then we'll start to hear from all of our speakers. So for anyone who's unfamiliar, we're a charity in the UK. We work on food and farming issues. In very broad terms, this includes advocating for food and agriculture policies and practices that enhance the health and welfare of people and animals, improve the working and living environment, enrich society and culture, and promote equity. Through the Alliance, we represent around 100 national public interest organizations working at international, national, regional, and local levels. We're relatively small with around 25 to 30 staff members, but our work covers quite a wide remit, such as, for example, the Real Bread campaign, which is running Sourdough September right now. We've got capital growth urban agriculture work in London and beyond, children's food campaign, sustainable food places, and Food Power's national food poverty program. So we cover quite a wide range when it comes to food, I'd say. And recently, we've started convening workshops for a small group of people from programs that are funded by the National Lottery Community Fund who work on food around the UK. This is called the Food Learning Forum. And so the aim has been to improve connections and strengthen the sector, partly through workshops for the members of this forum. But what we also want to do with it is make sure that any learning we have is shared far more widely with the Sustain Alliance and others working in this area. And so following each of these workshops for members, we're hosting a webinar on the same topic that's available for anyone to join. And then we'll also live on our website. So that's where we are right now. That's how we're here today. Back in July, we had a discussion among forum members about diversity inclusion in our sector, and we were focused mostly on the question of why is it so hard to talk about race. It was facilitated by BRAP, who were absolutely excellent to work with. I'm going to see if Sarah can put their website in the chat for people. So if you're interested in doing work along similar lines, we'd highly recommend getting in touch with them, although I think they're very busy. But anyway, this workshop was an opportunity for the forum members to reflect on events from the summer, how our organizations are responding, what we can do next, both as a sector and as kind of as accountability partners to each other's programs or organizations, so to speak. So the aim of today's webinar is to continue a bit of this discussion and broaden it out. Not all of our speakers here today were in that session. It's not meant to be a recap or a repeat of that session in any way. It's just a fresh conversation looking at a similar topic with the aim of sharing more widely how the sector is responding, what's on the horizon, and how we can dig in much more deeply. We've got an initial question to kick things off and hear from each speaker. Then we're going to see where this discussion takes us based on what comes out in the initial answers to the questions. We'll also be able to take some questions from the audience. So please do add these to the chat as we go along. I'm delighted today to be joined by 5 different people. We've got Andre and James from Feedback. We have Dale from the Soil Association, Claire, who works as a freelance grower and writer and who also just published a book, and Alisa from Sustainable Food Places. So I'm going to ask them to all join us on camera now if they can. And I'm going to put forth our introductory question. Oh, I just got told that I might have cut out when I was saying where Claire is from. So Claire works as a freelance organic grower and writer. And she just published a book. Don't want to miss that. So we've got our 5 speakers joining us. I'll ask them to respond in alphabetical order just because it's an easy way to keep track of people. And I'll start with our opening question. So is that everyone? Let's see. Great. So intro question today is, here we go. When it comes to the food and farming sector and our own organization or our own work, in relation to action for racial justice and or reaction to this summer's events, what do you see as seedlings of hope or healthy new sprouts of ideas and action? And where do you think things have been sitting fallow too long and need a deeper dig and regenerative approach? So I'm going to start with Alisa, and then we'll hear from Andre, then Claire, then Dale, and then James. Is that okay? We'll head over to you, Alisa, first.
All right, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me all right. I might have to take my video off depending on the signal. But I'm Alisa Graham-Brown. I work for the Sustainable Food Places program. I'm a program officer for that program. For anyone who doesn't know, the SFP program helps establish and support cross-sector food partnerships across the UK. And we're looking to transform the food system together. So check out our website if you haven't seen us before. What to be thankful for, what to be hopeful for. There's a lot. Conversations like this one, for sure. All of us here today in this virtual room, we're coming together with the intention of having difficult conversations, with the intention of checking our privilege, with the intention of learning and sharing learning. And I think that's really beautiful and something to be hopeful for, definitely. Oh, distortion on the mic. Okay. Is that slightly better? Maybe not.
I think when we tested earlier and you didn't have your headset on, it sounded fine, so it could be the headset.
Okay.
But your call. think we might have lost Alisa.
Hello?
Oh, there you are. Great.
Yeah, I'm back. Okay.
Yep. Sounds perfect.
So yeah, lots to be hopeful for, conversations like this one. I guess in terms of the work that I've been doing, really excited about the work that SFP is doing regarding race, equity, diversity, and inclusion. This is a piece of work that I've started within the team with my colleague Ben Messer from Food Matters. And I consciously say starting because when we first had these conversations a few months ago, Ben and I sat down and we thought, you know, we want to be checking our privileges along the way throughout our design process. I'm a woman of color, yes, but I'm a light-skinned woman of color. I'm able-bodied. I have so many privileges. And, you know, Ben is a white man. This is something that we want to acknowledge and be very much aware of during our design process. A core aspect of the program is that we're not claiming to speak on behalf of our members. So we don't want to be embedding our bias assumptions about what our members need or what our members are dealing with in these beginning stages of the program. Something that Ben and I had a chat about early on is that design can be racist too. In the same way the statistics can be racist, in the same way that, you know, these are things that seem innocuous, but they are not free from bias. So the race, equity, and diversity and inclusion program that we're doing with SFP, what is it about? In simple terms, it really is us providing the tools and support, but not determining the destination or the needs of our membership. We're being led by a participatory methodology, and we're basically just trying to find a way that we can better listen to and be guided by and share the expertise of our network. And then thereafter, support our network to do the same thing within their own communities. So it really is a listening process, and it's going to be a embedded programmatic way of thinking more than anything else going forward. So I'm very excited about that, and I do welcome you all to join our launch on the 17th of September, so next week. I'll put the link in the chat, but we have the privilege of being joined by Deputy Mayor Councillor Ashla Craig and SFP Coordinator Kemi Akinola. And we're going to be talking about how we can be actively anti-racist within the food sector. So do please join us. I'll put the link in the chat. In terms of things that are fallow for too long, love the metaphor, by the way. I think generally speaking, there are a few things I've noticed in the way that the third sector has acted regarding race, equity, diversity, and inclusion that I think we can move away from. So quick fixes are something I've noticed. Things like one-off unconscious bias training. Unconscious bias training sounds good in practice, but I think but I think in practice it's actually quite distracting because it makes you focus on the unconscious as opposed to the conscious things that you could actually be doing. I think it also focuses responsibility on the individual as opposed to the company or the organization in quite a neoliberal way. And yes, we all need to be, you know, checking in with ourselves about our own biases, but this shouldn't be the approach that an organization takes when they're looking to make structural change. And I'm sure I'm echoing the frustrations of many of the people in this virtual room about that. Another thing I've noticed is tokenization of POC, particularly in case studies and in reports. You know, that's fine if you are working actively with those communities, but if you're not, it really is quite obvious. And finally, something I've noticed is that inclusivity is often only mentioned or focused upon when you have marginalized folks in the room. You know, it's great that that's happening, But I think that consideration around inclusivity should be there even if your current space isn't diverse. How else are you going to make undiverse spaces diverse if you don't start making those environments in the first place? I could go on, but I think I've reached my time. So those are some things I'm hopeful for, and some things that I would like to see changed. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. That was such a good start, and a lot of things there that I was already writing down in terms of, yeah, design seeming innocuous, but not necessarily isn't, and yeah, the quick fixes and tokenization. So I'm not going to respond. I'm going to move on. Andre is up next.
Thanks, Maddie. So I'm relatively new to the food and environment sector, having worked for about 12 years in the youth and community sector. So my views are kind of from a bit of a newbie. And yeah, so in terms of hope, I think one of the things that has really got me looking up is that there is a building consensus and a vocal consensus on the idea that the way power is distributed isn't just. And I think from my experience working in the community sector, there's often, it can feel, particularly for communities comprised of people of color or people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, that whilst the injustices at a community level continue, kind of the gears of NGOs, government institutions, etc., continue to grind on, verbalizing the need for change, also while continuing the situation exactly as it stands. So I think it's for me, it feels quite unique to be in a position now where there is almost across the board this language which is saying that things are not just. And I think even moving beyond that, the way of organizing to challenge and oppose those patterns are in themselves kind of deinstitutionalized. If you look at kind of various movements who are campaigning avidly for change right now, Black Lives Matter. I mean, you can even look kind of across the way at kind of the environmental sector as well, and look at Extinction Rebellion and Animal Rebellion, and you can see that there's this deinstitutionalized praxis or way of pursuing change. And alongside that, there's calls to remove power from certain institutions and invest that power elsewhere. So I think that's to me, it's really interesting in it. And there's this potential to think about, where do we invest this power that we recoup? Who are the new actors who are going to be undertaking some of this work? How do we reinvigorate kind of our civic structures and civic life to make sure that they are as inclusive as possible? So yeah, a lot there for me, I think, which is exciting, and there's kind of work to be done, and there's a place for everybody in that work. And I guess on the flip side of that, I would say that the spaces that I'm concerned about, perhaps they're laying fallow. To what degree are we really interrogating our position in these processes? And I think particularly in a time where we have a lot of public figures who are paying lip service to agendas, whilst acting kind of in countervailing ways to those agendas. I think it's incumbent on us to really think about what is the practical impact of our action in the spaces that we're in, and how are they being experienced by marginalized people? Are we actually serving to improve their lives, or support them to take action on things that matters? Or are we part of a system which is continuing to kind of propagate stagnated processes and a lack of change? So yeah, I think there's something about really interrogating that and making sure that we understand diversification and inclusion means a diversification of our aims and our methods, as well as just the people who are in the room. yeah, I think I'll probably leave it there.
Great. I think that we might have lost Maddie. So this is Sarah here, standing in the wings. Hopefully you can all hear me. So thanks very much for that, Andre. I'm not sure that Maddie told me the order that we were going in. I'm not sure. Wonderful. Thank you. Luckily, my presenters are on board. So so now I'm going to hand over to Claire. Thank you, Claire.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. Wow, what amazing comments to follow. It's amazing to be in this company. I don't work for an organisation, so it's interesting to hear how this question has been answered by people who are working on that kind of organisational level. Because for me, I'm very much peripheral to all of that, and so the conversations I'm having are when I sort of either participate in conversations around within organisations, or just between myself and colleagues and friends and family sometimes too. So yes, just a caveat that I don't have much organisational experience because I'm a freelancer. Where are my seeds of hope? Well, I'm hopeful that this conversation is actually happening, that it's moving from the margins into the centre, and with that, my hope is that comes with accountability, and that organisations don't feel that they can take cursory data and then get funding and then that's done and done. Like, oh, we've managed to pull in X, Y, and Z people and we've met our criteria, and then we get our funding and then we push on with whatever our objectives are, irrespective of whether we're paying attention to whether what we do actually serves a greater push towards a just society. So yeah, I think that's probably where my hope lies. I think Andre might have touched on this, but there's more language around this, and more fluidity, more fluency around how we can speak about these issues as well. And I think that that becoming sort of more central in the way that we address structural inequality and injustice within the work that we do and the way that we operate day to day makes it more possible for those conversations to actually happen. And I'm a big, I suppose it's because I write now, but I think language is really important. It's really powerful. How we use it is really important. And so I find that my focus gets pulled to that, and how we speak to each other, how we speak about other people, how we speak to people who we're speaking to, and by virtue of that, who is left out of those conversations. If we looking at language and the centrality of how we communicate, I think has really started to shift. There's language that was kind of, the idea of privilege, the idea of, was peripheral to so many conversations I was having in workspaces, and now it's central. And so I think that's really hopeful. Yeah, and I think it seems like a lot of organisations, albeit a lot of them tokenistically, are recognise that this isn't something that they can ignore anymore just because it doesn't affect them directly. Because what that says is the people who are making those decisions are not the people who are affected by certain structural inequalities that need to be addressed. What has been left fallow. I could talk about this for hours, but I've only got a couple of minutes. What's been left fallow? All of this, everything that we are going to try and address, hopefully from this point onwards for the rest of our lives, because unfortunately it's a lifetime's work. But to unravel that which has been embedded in the systems that organise society and our organisations that exacerbate and create, exacerbate, and perpetuate injustice and inequality. So yeah, it's a lot, but I suppose we're in it for the long haul, right? As long as people recognise that this isn't just a 2020 thing, that this is it now. Hopefully that this shift is going to be forevermore, and also that it has to happen through absolutely every level of every organisation, of every interaction, of everything that we do now has to be imbued with this urge to push for equity at every level. So I think the things that have been left fallow are addressing power structures, even the power structures within smaller organizations within which we work. Who makes decisions, who controls the money, who decides who gets hired and who doesn't, and that is a matter of both personal reflection, and also structural, or deconstructing those structures, both kind of on the intellectual, conceptual level, but then the actual level of actually pulling these things to pieces and readdressing our hiring practices, or our the way that we communicate with people, the way that we reach out to people. And the thing that's been left fallow for the longest time, our focus today is, well, I suppose we're using the word diversity inclusion. The conversation has been ignited by what's happened this summer in terms of the kind of in terms of Black Lives Matter and conversations around race. But then we need to look at this with an intersectional lens. Like, race doesn't live in this one identity that's finite and that's it. Not only is race like a multitudinous range of identities, not binary, then they intersect with trans identities and queer identities, and then we need to talk about ableism and all the isms and phobias, and we need to be looking at this from a much more multifaceted position, and that's a hell of a lot of work, but it's really important, because as far as I'm concerned, you're not really doing the work of anti-racism unless you're figuring out how we lift everybody up. It is not about equity. Is about taking everyone with us, as opposed to creating silos of identity and only advocating in one direction, because we think if we can just solve that, then we can just tick it off and that will be done. But yeah, I think that's it. I could keep going on, I suppose, but yeah, burn it all down. Let's start again.
Thanks, Claire. I'm going to go on to Dale next, please.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I agreed with so much of what's been covered already, but yeah, I just wanted to start with a little bit of background about me. So I'm the head of the Food for Life Get-Togethers programme, which aims to build stronger connections between people from different backgrounds and generations through cooking, growing and sharing good food together. And I've been leading the Soil Association's Diversity Inclusion Working Group for the last 2 years. I'm also a graduate of African history. I've travelled and worked and volunteered extensively across Africa over a number of years, and managed multiple health promotion programmes targeted at excluded or minority communities. So that's me. And one of the things, the most important things that I've learned, I suppose, from working in diversity inclusion today, is that the breadth of the remit of diversity inclusion is potentially overwhelming, and to achieve real change requires prioritising and focusing down on what's feasible and has, I think, the potential to have the greatest impact. So with this in mind, I wanted to start by saying what I'm sort of not going to focus on today, and that is recognising that the work we're doing to take action on racial justice is part of a broader diversity and inclusion agenda, which Claire was just talking about. And in particular, I'm going to focus on sort of inclusive recruitment and workforce strategies that we're putting into place. But I'm not going to focus on the sort of wider food and farming sector and diversity and inclusion there. And I'm unfortunately not going to be able to talk to you a bit about Food for Life Get-Togethers and the work that they're doing around, that we're doing around sort of targeting services at more diverse beneficiary groups as well. But welcome any questions on any of that if you have them. So yeah, with that said, I do see some seedlings of hope in relation to improving diversity inclusion at the Soil Association. These seedlings probably is the right word. Although we've been looking at this for a few years now, we recognise that we're very much at the start of this journey, and we see it as a process and not an event. And we recognise also that we've got a long way to go. But having said that, I do see three sort of main seeds of hope from what we've been doing so far, and partly spurred on by the events of this summer. We now have a really good level of involvement from senior leadership in this agenda. So, for example, we've got a diversity inclusion lead on our trustee and certification boards who've got the oversight of the agenda, and We've also signed up to the commitments outlined in the Bristol Equality Charter, which I can put a link to in the chat. It's worth having a look at. It's got a good toolkit to go with it as well. And yeah, we've also got a regular sort of discussion around diversity and inclusion and the agenda and where we're at in terms of progress at the Soil Association's senior executive meeting as well. And we found that sort of involvement of senior leaders is absolutely vital to ensure that we get buy-in to this work more broadly across the organisation. The second seedling of hope was around the work that we're doing to improve the way we capture equality data, and in the process of setting measurable quality goals in our people plan, which again has trustee oversight and exec accountability. And the third seedling is we are focusing on meaningful action that we can actually take to improve the inclusivity of our recruitment and workplace. So that includes advertising in different places, mandatory diversity inclusion training for all recruiting managers, and an online diversity inclusion forum. So leadership buy-in, equality goals, and taking action to improve the diversity of our workforce. So three seedlings of hope that I wanted to share. But yeah, having said that, as I said, there is still a long way to go, and to ensure that the Soil Association is representative of and inclusive to diverse communities. And we're exploring how to progress a longer-term diversity inclusion strategy to do this, including researching examples of best practice to help. And I'd recommend you have a look at British Council's diversity assessment framework, which is worth a look as an established model and a way of doing that over a long period of time. But yeah, although we've made some progress, I suppose the cynic in me, so sorry to end on a cynical note, but you know, we are still at the start of the process, as I say, and progress can at times be really frustratingly slow. So you need to be signed up for the long term, I think. So that's it from me.
Thank you, Dale. And finally, we'll go over to James.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Maddie. And yeah, quite a tough act to follow. There's some really amazing kind of reflections coming from this conversation already. And it's like, yeah, thinking just mind racing with so many interesting things being said. So yeah, I work for Feedback. So kind of a food campaigning organization, trying to sort of shift towards a sustainable food future, which is going to be beneficial for the planet and people. I guess I'm probably here primarily through my work managing the EcoTalent project, which was it's a project that we kind of started last year with an attempt to address some of the kind of structural barriers to access that people faced getting paid work in the environmental sector. And that is through managing kind of a paid internship program, which we're working on at the moment. And we're sort of specifically trying to focus on kind of reaching as broad a range of people in diverse communities as possible through that work. So yeah, I guess seedlings of hope within that. I'll talk a little bit about the context of the project, but yeah, I guess more broadly, just to kind of touch upon what some other people were saying as well, this kind of widespread kind of acknowledgement of the inequality that kind of pervades like society as a whole, but then specifically within kind of people's access to food, and then people's access to food kind of within the access to kind of employment, and just like a kind of a lack of agency and a lack of recognition within kind of the sector as a whole. Claire touched upon this idea of intersectionality, and I think that there's a kind of a slightly more broad understanding of how these issues do intersect, and how all of them need to be taken into consideration in order for us to kind of move forward. But I just wanted to touch on something that Claire said actually when she referred to the fact that she didn't kind of have much organizational experience, and that is such an important aspect to focus on, this idea that like this is the perspectives that we need to hear are from people that aren't necessarily within kind of mainstream institutions that are perpetuating the kind of current system that we've got. And it's a question of sort of involvement in kind of grassroots, and just this need to understand that the answers necessarily aren't within these traditional power structures within NGOs. I wanted to focus on some of the kind of
the positives that we've seen from the project so far. It's been quite clear from other organisations within the sector that they're really excited to be kind of supporting the project as much as possible. There's like an understanding that there's a really widespread need of this, and we've been really happy to sort of, despite some kind of initial challenges with how we made our opportunities kind of advertised and available, we've noticed kind of as we've gone, like, installed kind of a learning process within our own work, and kind of been able to kind of make some adjustments with how we're advertising the project and the availability of these internships. And as a result, I think we've had some successes with making them kind of more visible by the two communities that maybe come from slightly more disadvantaged socioeconomic statuses and communities. And that's been a really exciting thing. But I guess to sort of shift from some of the hopes to some of the things that are more fallow, just some kind of reflections I've noticed from kind of my own work within the context of feedback as an organization, and then how that kind of feeds into maybe some of the more wider structural issues that we see within the sector. But I guess one of the things that I kind of recognized quite early on within this was the fact that there's a certain irony that the project, we think, oh yes, of course, people lack access to kind of paid work within the sector. They might have lacked the opportunity to go to university and get a master's in sustainable food, so whatever, which will enable them to kind of get this work. And then I think we just kind of realized that very quickly this idea of just offering a short-term paid work opportunity to someone isn't going to address a lot of these issues at all. One thing we've kind of realized is this need for, there's some great learning that's going on and opportunities for people whilst they're on the internship, but it's a case of, okay, what's going to happen after this work? Are there kind of opportunities for those people to feel kind of welcomed within the sector as a whole? Are there going to be like legitimate concrete job opportunities for them to come through that? Are there structures in place at Feedback to actually listen to the views of the young people? We've very quickly realized that we need to kind of change our model so that the participatory learning we're doing with some of our young people, there's actually a mechanism for those views on issues around capitalism, on structural inequality, on access to food, for those views to actually come through and then permeate into our strategy. And I feel that speaks to this kind of a lack of ability within the sector to kind of address these power and privilege dynamics. And I'm coming from a place of having kind of worked on these issues for less than 6 months, but kind of an observation, I guess, for me, is something that also that Claire touched upon, and Alisa, this kind of idea that who is controlling the money and the resources. You know, there's work to be done in kind of food activism and racial equity, and a large proportion of money goes to Feedback, which is the vast majority white led and staffed organization to do work on what effectively is sort of has an anti-racist element. And within that, it ties into this idea that another thing that Claire touched upon was kind of project outputs and outcomes, and where there's this kind of slight tension. It can lead to essentially what I think would be kind of white saviorism within an organization, saying, yes, we've kind of engaged these groups, whatever that means, without necessarily creating structures for the communities to be involved in the work that then kind of NGOs should be supporting. But I think there was something that I wanted to end on a quote that came into mind when Claire was speaking as well, kind of around this kind of the idea of intersectionality, but trying to avoid this kind of white saviorism, which is Lila Watson, who's a Indigenous activist and artist, which is, I came across it recently, but the quote is, if you come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come here because your liberation is bound up with me, then let's work together. And I think just having the more people are working in the sector and the more opportunities there are for diverse perspectives to be leading in organizations, the more we can understand that, yeah, our collective liberation is bound together, and we're not in a position where we can come up with these solutions kind of divided. Anyway, that's that.
Thanks, James. It seemed like there was a few themes that were coming out from people's, like the 5 different responses there. One kind of, it seemed almost like I don't want to say double-edged sword, but the two sides of the coin of like there's more attention getting being brought to these issues, which everyone thinks is really positive, but then there's like a slippery slope or like a danger of tokenism that comes along with that, and kind of how there can be substantive action by organizations that's deep rooted, and kind of that seems like both like a positive, but there's also like a sense of like, how do we make sure that this really sticks and is long. The other thing I kind of got through from this was that this sense of like every level needs to be addressed. You know, it was like the conscious, the unconscious, the individual, the organizational, the structural, the power distribution, the money systems. It, like I think Claire was saying, it there is no level that it will not permeate, and therefore action needs to match that. I also was thinking a bit around Dale talking about what's achievable, but then also thinking of like intersectional and deep-rooted approaches, and how we figure out, how do we make what's achievable into something that's also deep-rooted. And then the other thing was recruitment as a theme, kind of, and I think we could pick that up. But first, I want to see, was there anyone who wanted to jump in and kind of respond to each other?
I can start. So I've recognised some of those themes as well, Maddie, around sort of tokenism and quick fixes as, you know, something which you've got to be a bit wary of, and make sure that this recognition that you know, I think quite a few of us have touched on, that this the current status quo is not working, and you know, essentially, you know, our institutions have failed at diversity and inclusion to date. So you know, how much should we put faith in relying on them to, you know, as they are now, to deliver the change that's needed in the future? Sort of chimes with me a lot, and I guess, you know, from our experience trying to do this work recently, we found that, you know, there is a need, and I don't know how other speakers have experienced this, but sort of hold your nerve on what you think is the kind of more meaningful sort of structural changes that you can achieve and affect, rather than, you know, saying, oh, but you know, look at our website, it doesn't look very representative, let's fix that. You know, it's the image, but behind it there's no you know, substance. So yeah, I guess you know, sometimes the harder work is working on some things like the recruitment practices, making sure that you've got representation at all levels, you know, thinking about how you're going to achieve that, which is a longer term goal probably, than you know, making sure you've got some sort of representative pictures on your website.
Yeah, certainly. Claire?
And just to sort of add to that, I think, because I think you're right, obviously representation isn't just about the communication, the media that you're putting out there in order to represent what your organization does. You know, and people, what I'm trying to say is that I think, you know, we need to address who is called into these organizations, who is doing the work, who is making decisions. But fundamentally, existing organizations, and unless they're going to disband and give all their money to a new organization that intends to kind of build itself up anew, needs to come from a position of anti-racism and doing that anti-racist work, so that when Black, brown people of color come into that organization, they're coming into a place that isn't dangerous and violent. And I use those very powerful words, cognizant of how strong they are. But what if an organization isn't actually doing the anti-racism work to recognize how discrimination is embedded into their working practices, the language they use, the interactions they have, you know, then there's no benefit really. Well, there's benefit, but there's more cost to bringing in people in order to represent a certain racial identity and be there to I don't know, be a token gesture of that racial identity in a space that isn't safe for them. And so I'm very wary of that idea of, and that's what I mean by addressing our hiring practices, because it isn't just about choosing people, increasing the percentage of the people from minority backgrounds in an organization. It's also like, what is their experience when they're actually there? What are the support structures for those people when they're actually there?
Mm-hmm.
And what will be their experience? And so I think it's a bigger question than even just calling people in. It's also about what we're calling people into. So yeah.
Yeah, Alisa.
Yeah, I really value that you use those powerful words, Claire, because it can be violent. And I think sometimes anti-racist work done shoddily can also be violent. It can be very, very destructive. I've seen in the past where organizations have asked their singular or maybe one of the few people of color within their team to lead their D&I initiatives, and then take credit for their work, for their labor, and that's exploitative, and that is violence as well. So it's about doing things in the proper way, and it's about creating, like you said, Claire, environments that are safe.
And also just expecting any person of color to be an expert or to speak about it in a way that they, that centralizes that aspect of their identities, if that's the only reason why they're there, is really damaging and really, really wounding. And often it's happening without permission. I say that I'm not in an organization, but what happened to me over this summer, the amount of people who asked me deeply inappropriate questions, or asked for my free labor, or just barged into my inbox, my text messages, asking, draining me, because by virtue of nothing but my racial identity, I should have the answers, I should be willing to perform my trauma for them, I should be it was okay to ask me questions that were so deeply personal, because suddenly we were having this conversation and I was obviously their only Black friend in that moment. They felt that they could communicate with that, can communicate those questions too. I think we need to recognize that we exist outside of those racial identities too. I'm a food grower. I actually have that's my job. You can ask me questions about that too.
Yeah. The other I'm not going to add to that because that was there. Yes. Did anyone else want to jump in on that before I bring us into the next the next question I was going to bring up? As people are saying it. Yeah, Andre.
So just going to quickly talk about the idea of kind of what's achievable. And I think there's something really interesting there, in that it relies on a set of knowledge which is kind of innately been influenced by the power that you're seeking to change. And so I just wanted to kind of, I guess, note and underline that there are processes that need to take place to interrogate how we understand what is considered valid knowledge and what is invalid, and what's a valid path forward and what's an invalid path forward. Because unfortunately, one of the way that power exerts itself is that it gets to choose which sets of ideas or ways of being are considered legitimate or correct, or what's insane and what's sane, and etc. And I guess you can kind of see that playing out now with the protest movements, in that you have people working in a kind of destructured and deinstitutionalized way, pursuing change in a way that they believe is most effective, and the rebukes that are kind of thrown back at them, and that's the incorrect way to do change. And so I think it's just important to underscore that as we are collectively undergoing these processes, it's not as simple of just the doing. We need to think about the doing, and we need to think about what are we relying on here in making these judgments and these analyses.
I would
I think.
really. Oh, sorry, Maddie.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Dale.
sort of echo a lot of that. And although we've sort of critiqued unconscious bias training as a sort of quick fix, one of the things that, looking into sort of the range of different biases that we can all have, is that we all do have biases. And actually, if you regardless of your how representative you think your group is, I think as Alisa said as well, you've got to recognize that those biases are going to come through. So how are you reaching your decisions and your conclusions, and who are you consulting to do that? So we've sort of tried to make sure that we aren't just focusing on kind of equality goals in terms of percentages in the workforce, but also thinking around how do we consult with our workforce at the moment about how inclusive they feel and accessible they feel our workplaces, and then looking externally as well and speaking with other communities to say, well, what do you think about the sort of association as a potential place that you could come and work, or does it represent you, and is it something that what action could we be taking to improve diversity and inclusion there for different communities, and to try and draw on those different perspectives, because just having a quota is gets into tokenism again, I suppose, doesn't it? But at the same time, in terms of meaningful action, I kind of do still think it is one of the most meaningful things that you can do in terms of trying to address the kind of representational DNA of your organization, because that is how checks and balances on those different biases that we all have starts to happen, more naturally, and people can bring their different perceptions and understanding and experiences to that decision-making process in a more mainstreamed way across an organisation. But just sort of wanted to echo some of what's been said there.
I think Andre, your point too was just related to what Alisa was saying at the beginning a little bit around like design and the importance of things not being things that might seem oh God, what's the word? I don't want to say unbiased. Things that can seem neutral, like the design of a program, aren't necessarily neutral, right? They actually could have a lot of ingrained discrimination even, or exclusivity, or sort of things that might not, depending on who's designing them. And I'm thinking again, like what James was saying about like the EcoTalent, where it was like when you step back and you say like, okay, we've like got these paid internships. That's really good, because paid internships are hard to come by and really important. And we know that that's like definitely in this sector a really big issue of like unpaid labor and kind of where we all choose to draw those lines. But then saying like, well, what happens after that? What kind of job opportunities are there? What kind of career progression is there for people who maybe do get this great unpaid internship? And then what? Then, and so it's kind of like, I just think I like that idea of kind of thinking about how programs are designed, and then taking a step back, and then maybe taking another step back to try to unroot those things that might not always be obvious at first glance, to some people, or more so to some than others, perhaps. James, I think you wanted to jump in, and then I think we might pass over to Kath for our kind of wrap up segment. This always flies by so fast. I'm like, I feel like we should have a whole other webinar just on recruitment issues. But for now, to James, and then I think we'll go over to James, and if anyone has any final thoughts they want to conclude with, then we'll pass over to Kath.
Yeah, sorry, I'll be try and be super quick. Because there's obviously a lot of other good stuff to talk about. In what I found kind of useful, and hopefully other people working in sort of similar organizations might, is when you're sort of interrogating your own hiring practices, realizing that as Claire was like quite rightly pointing out, that isn't the end of the journey. And what I found really useful in terms of sort of examining my own bias and how that might manifest itself in the organization is kind of seeing where more broad kind of societal power structures and injustices are mirrored within kind of organizational. And Claire was touching upon this idea of, people somebody not feeling welcome or represented, or it being a violent and dangerous place. If people think about it in kind of in the context of sort of anti-assimilation, it's something that's not really come up a lot in some of the other kind of diversity conversations that I've had, is this quite implicit expectation that somebody who might be from a person of color that has to just fit within the dominant culture of that organization. And then it's just like, you can do all the great work in interrogating your hiring practices and try and increase the diversity of the people that are coming in. But if you don't address that kind of unseen thing, you're not going to retain any of those staff because they're going to feel in an unsafe and violent place, as Claire said. So I just wanted to highlight that seeing those kind of the mirror, seeing things that I haven't experienced myself, but seeing kind of wider power and privilege dynamics and how they act out in an organization. It's kind of mirrored from wider society.
Yeah. We had one question from the audience that I'm not sure if we're going to have time to get to, but it was, could we have some stories about problems that have been addressed successfully in-house? I think someone was looking for like an example of things that have examples of people doing things well. So does anyone have any final thoughts or want to chime in on that one before we scoot over to Kath? Without trying to I was listening to another organization recently. They were saying we don't want to be kind of just like commending any organizations explicitly, being like, well done, you've solved it. But if there are examples of that.
I think I would just say that that's probably not that useful of a question to answer. Sorry to the person who asked the question. It's just not about reaching a goal that's a perfect place. I like I said at the beginning, I think this is a lifetime's work. It's going to be generations of work to undo this, and so there'll probably be moments of feeling triumph or feeling seen, or I don't know whether there's not going to be we can write this great case study up and it'll be and that's our perfect example of how these things worked out great. I think there's going to be so many unseen things that worked, and it's I don't know. I don't imagine that anybody's got like a great story in their pocket, because it's ongoing work and it's all about unraveling power, and that stuff is forever work.
Yeah, that is a great point. I hadn't thought about that perspective. And yeah, really good point. Yeah, when it came up in this other webinar, yeah, that's a good one. Okay, does anyone else want to chime in on that one, or should we move over to Kath for our closing? Yeah, I feel like there's some nods. Great, let's to Kath it is then.
I just want to say thank you so much to the presenters. I've been sitting here feeling really agitated and like worked up with emotion about what you're saying about how we should be changing. And I don't feel like I'm known for kind of summarizing and making poems out of what people have just said. And I was all ready to do that in order to try and summarize, but I don't own what you have just said. And I really feel that's kind of inappropriate. What I would like to do as Sustain, as an alliance, is to make the profound commitment to listen, because you've said that you welcome the conversation. And what I'm getting is totally the idea that we're on a journey, but it feels like a journey up a mountain. I mean, it's no coincidence that Martin Luther King used so many analogies of mountains and climbing and looking over to the promised land, because we are wanting profoundly to move to a place where there is equality in access to that land, to that promised land, and profoundly access to seeds and money and power, and making that what I loved what you said, Claire, about equality does not happen unless we're lifting everybody, and that is something that Sustain was founded partly to address. And we aren't there yet at all, are we? And as you say, it takes hundreds of years for people to wake up to such issues and to start the transfer of power. And of course, the resistance to that is enormous, as we see in so much of our politics these days. But I love the idea that we do this in allyship, that we do this in solidarity, and that what I do observe in the movement, of course, is that when none of us are the kind of people who want to have power, really, we're not ambitious for political power or massive land ownership. Yes, if we can give it away to lots of people who are going to grow vegetables, but we are people who need to also recognize that we are sometimes held back by our own assumptions and the own stories that we tell ourselves about who we are. So I might describe myself as an anti-racist. Am I? If I'm part of a structure that is upholding inequalities, then I've got to be brave and challenge that in myself, in my organization. And when you've asked questions about who controls the power to hire and fire and who controls the money, in Sustain, it's me. So I am deeply privileged, and I need to totally understand that within the context of the organisation. But then, and get to some practical things that we can do. But when we talk about what's achievable, I start feeling a bit disappointed. We're talking about a revolution here, and we need to be challenging ourselves in far more fundamental levels. And I feel like we're at the foothills of that mountain from which we'll get a much better view eventually to even start understanding that. So within all of that, I just want to make a promise to try and change. A promise, and this is a promise to the whole audience, it's not sort of looking just at speakers, but a promise that we as the food movement, food is always the lens through which you can see equalities and inequalities, access to power and money and land, and no access to power and money and land, marginalisation and inclusion. And we know that food, when it's done really well, can be part of all of that. So I would feel so proud if we started on that long journey, and that we did it in allyship, and that we really make some changes. But our measurements won't just be, as you said, about percentages of people of particular colours within workplaces. Obviously, that is partly important, and that people are welcome and not feeling like they are violently dealt with. But that also the fundamental metrics change of how much land is owned by people of different backgrounds, how much money is, the actual physical, tangible things that make us able to have power are in the hands of people who can use them well. So all ideas welcome always, and really enjoy the idea of being on this journey with you, all of you. Thank you so much. I am feeling really quite moved and emotional at the moment. So
Thank you, Kath. Always great to have your voice kind of drawing some of these things together and talking a bit more about what Sustain is doing. We've just run over by 3 minutes, which is, not my style typically, but sometimes we need to take a little bit of extra time. And so when it's important, we gotta make that happen. So just thank you again to James, to Dale, who had to leave us, to Claire, to Andre, and to Alisa for speaking with us today. Thanks to everyone who's joined in on the chat. It's been really interesting to hear what everyone's saying there. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of the questions on there, but it sounds like this is, and as we're hoping definitely at Sustain, this is the start of a very long, lifelong journey for us all as an organization and as people and as a sector, I think, truly. So thank you for joining us today, and I'll be emailing you with the recording shortly. Have a good rest of your Wednesday.
Claire, are you still there? That was honestly, what you said was so moving. You're amazing. You've gone all silent now. You're talking about voices and language. Are you allowed to? Yeah, there we go.